Alex, do you want to say anything about your what you're working on these days?
Oh, sure. Let's see. What I do is visionary vocabularies. It's a toolbox of foundational concepts for conflict resolution, communication, skill building, things like that. And it's still in the early stages, but I now have a better plan for identifying early adopters and conducting market research. And I've got a whole host of articles lined up for the Substack that I started. Yep, those are on the way.
Okay. I'll uh I'll add my bit. Um yeah. I'm still working on nodal maps. And the so I'm going through at the moment, basically work doing a lot of back end stuff. So I'm been looking at different ways to present the actual arguments, um, with a focus on trying to just make it usable as possible. I think the way we present it is going to be the big kind of barrier. Um, that's 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 my thinking. So I I also spent, but yeah, that's the main thing. Just going through different views and trying to make sure the back end matches and catches all the data that I need it to do. So yeah, you'll go, Ryan.
Sure. So maybe first, like a super brief introduction. I'm Ryan. I have mostly a computer science, a little bit of math background. Um, I did my PhD in probabilistic reasoning, particularly probabilistic programming, if anyone's heard of that. Um, but I've been thinking about structured argument for a while. I think maybe since COVID, when I was just like deeply frustrated with how bad we are as a society at having important discussions. Um, so yeah, I've been thinking about this more actively for the last few weeks, I would say. I have not started coding anything, but I've written a lot on what I think about this design space. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, welcome. Happy to have you. Always happy when we get more people involved. How did you end up hearing about us? Do you want to say? Just find
A
us on
lot of
YouTube.
Yeah, I think a lot of Googling of keywords. Maybe Reddit? I don't know. I was just sort of like trying my best to find all of the prior work because I hate, working on something and then discovering that you're just reinventing someone else's wheel,
Yeah.
which also has its benefits, but I don't want to be surprised by it. Um, yeah.
Yeah, we even have a kind of a list that we try to gather, two lists actually, of technology and people in the space. A bunch of it's out of date, like 2 or 3 years, and things are moving fast. So I've been thinking about trying to get an AI to kind of consolidate all this stuff, but haven't had a chance to put together. Um, cool. Does anyone have any topics we want to cover? We're actually kind of small this week, so we're kind of informal, but I don't know. Dale or
I
Al.
was well, on the topic of trying to get AI to go through the different past projects. Like I've often, asked a few of the different AI um, apps to do that, and it seems to draw on really old stuff. I often get like rationale, rational, or whatever that one that was. Yeah, stuff from years ago. Anyway, yeah, so um, I haven't found it works that well as actually finding and updating the list. But yeah, I was gonna say how I had a closer look at debate graph. Um, have you gone over that before, Bentley?
Yeah, yeah, and actually, I kind of meant to mention. I think Marc Antoine has actually worked with that team. Like, I think he did some
Mm,
contracting with them, so he might be also a good person to touch base. Yeah, Debate Graph actually got some really good traction. They were actually shown on a couple. I mean, it was years ago, now, but on like Good Morning America or something like that, where they were showing it during one election.
Yeah, they showed a few things on their site, and like I'd often seen it and just looked at the kind of and assumed their front page or their landing page was the gist of it without really going in very depth. They had like a radial graph, and and I kind of like dismissed at that point because I kind of like feel that for in my way of thinking, but that's not going to be the best way to go forward. But exploring it more, they've actually got quite a few different views, different ways of actually presenting the arguments. It was actually yeah, it's quite old. They did get some traction. I saw that, getting quite a few people to participate and got quite a bit of media interest. But yeah, I thought that would be a good example to actually talk about, lead us into why some projects haven't been successful um, when you would hope they would be, and basically saying just can we learn from that? What are the things? Why didn't that kick off? Um, and if you can identify, I don't know if everyone's done this, but I've kind of like have gone through the different projects and kind of come to a conclusion as to why um, each one hasn't worked in my own mind. But yeah, I thought we could focus on that. That's pretty much towards the top of our list of different agenda items. So
yeah, yeah, and I have a lot of thoughts on that. I'd be willing to pontificate on.
Yeah, agreed. I think that's a really valuable thing
Yeah.
because we've been, there's been a lot of projects, right? And we've been at this for a while, and there's been limited traction. So yeah, I'm curious, like, what the consensus view on the main problems.
Bill, since you brought it up, Bill, do you want to kind of talk through what your thoughts are?
uh, yeah, my thoughts have always been usability. So I just think you need to be, and actually I've been learning a lot from the actual the startup methodology, the lean startup
Lean
methodology.
startup.
Yeah, it's basically if you haven't got a problem, if you haven't got a solution to a problem that people have, then you're going to have a hard time getting traction. And I think that's a big part of it. Like basically a lot of projects in the CRT now, we we have an idea. If the world did this, this will fix everything. And it's not how it won't attract people basically because you're basically asking people to, change everything that they do or just automate, know about this. Maybe if you've got a huge marketing campaign or something like that, you might make progress. But in general, in the startup world, you need to actually identify the problem, make sure your solution solves that problem, and then go forward. And actually, on on that topic, it's like it's not that easy to actually think of the problems are really kind of big. It's like you're talking about how us as a society consume media, how we make decisions, how governments make decisions. A lot of those kind of uh, subjects basically what we're trying to address, and it's not you're not going to get individual users jumping on board. So I think that's a bit of a challenge I've thought about. Actually, just identifying who would use this, and basically, so you need to have your solution being able to improve upon what they're already doing. So and looking through, like when so I've got in my mind how my project Node on Maps is going to solve my issues, and I think people will find it useful. It's kind of a different thing. Like, okay, how do I set this up to actually, what problems would people solve with this? And to a point where they would, be willing to spend the time, the money, or whatever to actually make it happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. I could keep talking, but has anyone else got a...
Yeah, that's so interesting. I was thinking about the lean startup in this context this last week as well. Like, how do you make this sort of incremental so you can like sneak up on the network effect, right? Um,
Yep.
so one way is what you're saying, usability, which is either having the same sort of technology and improving the interface to it, or maybe also improving like the underlying mental model that you're trying to sell, maybe making it more intuitive or more powerful or something like that. Another way I was thinking about is I feel like kind of what we're doing is we're trying to enter like a video game genre and we're trying to jump straight to making an MMO. If that, I don't know if anyone plays games, but and maybe what we should be doing is going into that game genre and trying to design a really fun single player game, and then maybe see if you can make that single player game 2 players or 5 players or something, and see if you can scale from something that you personally would use on your own for some use, you get some utility out of it, and like sneak up on huge crowds of people using it that way. So for example, if you had a structure that when you wrote down something you were thinking about in this structure, you got some sort of like really useful feedback. Like maybe an AI is helping you think through something, or maybe you've got some sort of inference helping you to understand where your mind should be. You get like clarity out of it somehow. Maybe you start using that a whole bunch. Maybe you get your friends to use that. But like you don't require a million people to be using it before it's useful. And then maybe you figure out how to, me and my friend thought about this problem independently. We came up with different data structures. How do we like reconcile those data structures? Maybe that's like a form of argumentation. Yeah, I wonder if we can sneak up on it that way.
So how do you cross over from that to a game? When you say game, are you talking about making it fun?
Yeah, yeah. I guess in a game, fun is the value offering. We would probably have a different value offering, like I get clarity in thinking about my own political views, for example. But if you can offer clarity to an individual, maybe the product will take off without having mass adoption.
Yeah, I've done quite a bit of work using the lean startup. So I was in an actual startup that sold to a San Francisco genetics company. And then I was coaching startups in the Dallas area for 5, 10 years or something. A lot of it with lean, which is useful, especially, the thing about, test small experiments to make sure that you're going in the right direction. And do you actually solve the problem? And, what is your problem? I think a lot of these apps don't, like, we know what the problem is in abstract, but we don't know what the problem is in specifics. Like, do we want a faster horse? Right. That wasn't the goal when we were building a car. And and like for the iPhone and stuff like that, when he changed the paradigms, and a lot of that it's like kind of figuring out what people want. But yeah, small experiments, and I think several of us have kind of done those experiments, and we found different things missing. But some of it is it's a challenging space, and for a lot of lean startups, when you find a challenging space, the answer is find a different space to make money in. So we're kind of limited because we're kind of saying we're going to do the hard thing. Not that that does away with all of the lean stuff, but but it kind of means sometimes you have to tweak those systems a bit, or ignore certain parts because they make the assumption that of profit as opposed to social benefit. And the other thing that I kind of hear is people talk about getting people involved as far as creating them, which I think is useful. But I think if we ended up with 1 to 5% of participants being contributors and 95% just being reading, I think that would still be a success. Because if you really think about it, if you talk about an ecosystem with debates, they're in theory, assuming debates aren't endlessly deep, then you won't have, if you have 8 billion people on the planet, they can't all be contributing new stuff. And if we're, it used to be called the Canonical Debate Lab because we didn't want that repetition of people just repeating the same thing. So in theory, there isn't, we don't need that many people. And a lot of people just don't have time. They're raising their kids and having a life and struggling with their own mental illness or whatever, however things. So, having it, thinking about the different users of the system, there will be people that just want to be able to get the high level summary. There are going to be the people that want to go a little deeper because they kind of disagree with the high level summary and they want to find the hole and maybe plug it every once in a while. And then the deep people that are constantly looking at the stuff as it's coming in and counteracting the things that are inaccurate. So having all those people, but yeah, just finding, I built my own tool and it was so painful, not because of the UI, just the painfulness of thinking through an argument deeply enough that to actually, well, because mine had a scoring component on how it was organized. You had to get it organized correctly. And so that was extremely painful. And I think that that's just the core of what we want to accomplish. Sometimes you have to chop the wood to get to get it broken down. I mean, you can build tools that help. Now that we do have AI, that will be, I think that we finally have a better axe for doing stuff like that. But I haven't had a chance to play with that. I mean, I did play with it several months ago, but the step change in GPT 5.5, I use it for programming all the time. And it went from, it was annoying and sometimes it would be helpful and sometimes it would waste my time. And now it's like, I am going 2 to 4 times faster. And every once in a while I'll go completely off the rails and I have to delete a day's worth of work. But I do think it'll help in this. But I guess one of the things that I'm thinking also is I don't think we've found the core solve of the problem. I think a lot of people say, we put this in a debate graph. I mean, to Dale's point, what they thought when they did debate graph is that if you organize the information in this visual hierarchy, it'll make it obvious and that we've solved the problem. But that didn't solve the problem. Caio didn't solve the problem. It's not just a data entry issue. It's the fact that no one wants to read them. So solving for writing and for reading is very difficult. So I think we're still in the thing of we don't really know what we know in the big picture what our audience wants. They want to get from A to B faster, but is that a faster horse or is that a car, right? We don't know what the solution is. Now, I think I'm hitting on that with, my scoring system because that I think simplifies it a lot in a lot of ways, although it makes it harder for data entry. It's like a database, you can either have easy to write or easy to read, but you can't have both or speed wise. So I think we're still in the process where the good thing would be to do these small experiments where we build a UI, which would be even faster with AI being able to mock things up, right? And put it in front of people. And that gets us back to where you were talking about having some some example debates where we kind of have most of the data together so that we could we could run these experiments quickly and see how we can make this. For the lean startup, they also talk about is your company a vitamin or I can't remember if they use candy or something else, but it's like there's something people want, and then there's something people really need, and there's like need and want, and you're not supposed to go for the vitamin businesses, but
Yep.
we're in the market of selling vitamins, right? Because we want to help them, but it's actually even worse. We're like selling exercise equipment. Like, like they have to like put some effort into it. Although if they're mostly reading, maybe not. But that kind of concept is that it's hard. That's another reason why it's difficult, and where we need to experiment is how can we make this to where it doesn't have to be like, people do like challenge, if it's presented properly. So it's not like we need to make something completely frictionless, but putting the friction in the right place, to where it provides value that is, at least not completely painful. Because there isn't like a huge value. People get a lot of value in believing false things, because life is easier and you're able to hang out with your cohort that has this misconception. But the moment that we actually make truth so easily that, they then they may feel uncomfortable in their own tribe. So yeah. So my thought in all this, as far as like how I'm going to tackle this, is trying to make it a TV show or a YouTube video series. So it's going to be like science, or like science communication or other stuff like that, and using argument maps. And actually, there's a guy doing that today, which is interesting, and he has his own kind of scoring methodology, but his system is a little bit more opinionated, where mine is more factual is the wrong word. It requires data in order to change the score, where he's kind of arbitrarily setting scores based on his opinion. But anyways, so that's my next experiment. Sorry, Alex, what were you thinking?
Oh, no, I was just wanted to chime in here.
Yeah.
Sounds like part of the bottleneck here is the interface between the person and the system, where people find it challenging to take everything that they believe and everything that they care about and break it down into something that goes into one of these argument maps, and then use it, actually like enter everything, and then the argument map processes the data, and then maybe somebody else comes in and adds their information into it, and then they have to figure out what they want to do about the results. What does the result mean they should do? Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, I think some people won't have to worry about the entering it in. I think even reading it's painful.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's a good list of the kind of the three problems.
Actually, Bentley, I think that's a big one.
With the reading being painful.
Yeah. I'm like, almost everyone I look at, like, going back to usability, I want to be able to look at a topic and be able to understand it at least as quick as going to Wikipedia. Just reading in usual prose. It needs to compete with that, and it's so rare, but it does. It's almost all of them. It's like, oh,
Well, I find so I don't use um, I don't use a software to do the mapping, but the process is the same. So the software actually illustrates it really well. But what I find has made the difference is breaking down people's, like breaking down the problem description, defining the problem using 4 keywords, and then giving people solutions that use 4 corresponding keywords and defining things in terms of that. That helps people translate what they care about, what they want to happen, and what they're afraid of into something that can be written down very succinctly, very simply, and yet without losing anything important. And then that tells us how we go about changing the situation without forcing people into what I think is possibly the most intimidating part of this, where uh, somebody puts in their concerns, and then somebody adds a bunch of data, and then the algorithm spits out, oh well, you're just wrong. Just suck it up and do the thing. Just your fear is wrong. That's not a thing that humans like very much. So we don't have to do that though. That's part of defining the solution.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's a really interesting point. I to going along with the theme of how do we make these things easier, more comfortable to read. I have a hypothesis that um, if you go onto a page with an argument and the scores are already filled in some way, or there's like an opinion is already given preference on the page in some way, and that opinion is not yours or your tribe's, you're immediately going to feel like you're sort of in enemy territory. So I think that applies to, you know, that example of telling someone their fear is invalid, but I think that that also maybe applies to systems that have an argument tree and just have like some scoring defaultly available. Um, so I've been wondering if you can have a system like this that does not have scores by default, but maybe has a set of perspectives, and you can select a perspective and get the average scores for that perspective, or maybe just ask you, here are the um, like scores that tend to split people up the most. What do you think about these particular things? And it's not necessarily going to inform the user about what the general populace thinks, but it might help them break down the problem more easily. So it's sort of like reusing people's structure of the argument rather than reusing people's conclusions.
yes. I guess it depends on your goal.
Yeah.
So we have a couple people who have different goals in the group, and one is like helping people be introspective and understand a broader totality of the space and what other people are thinking, and also be open to other people's thoughts. And then some of us are trying to get to actually very few of us are trying to get to a definitive what is true about certain facts. Not the complete scope, but at some point, if we're going to vote for a proposition, they need to vote yes or they need to vote no. And knowing that I have considered everything about that um, is difficult without. Yeah. So would I, if it comes to that, then I think the scoring system kind of has to be. The scoring system provides other value that overrides the fact that when they first see it, they can be anchored they could be angered, you know, and then put in a fight or flight state where they're less rational. And some of the ways I tried to do that in my thing, because mine does have a score right up front, is I had the mascot be a robot called Goaliebot that just looks silly and stupid. So the idea is this is what Goaliebot thinks. Goaliebot's an idiot. So go in and figure out where he's wrong, why he's wrong, and correct. So that was meant to diffuse it, because I can't think of a way to get past. In this system, it makes it easier to read, because if you have 5 statements and they're scored and like 3 are pro and 2 are con, but they have numbers next to them, you can ignore the ones that you agree on the score. So then now, like if Society Library did a debate um, on the closing of a nuclear power plant, and there were 9,000 points. And it's like, well, no one's going to read over 9,000 statements, and that's deduped. So if we so to give them a way to go through that, they can, there's the top 10 because it's a tree. If they can ignore, 8 of them, and then there's 2 that they don't like the scores on, then they've cut out thousands of things they don't have to read. Yeah. So, anyways, that's just what I thought of when you're kind of saying that. So, but I could see other systems that you don't need a scoring system at all because it's just like, well, what a lot of just taking what people are debating about and taking and consolidating those comments into the most well-spoken, kind of less exaggeratory, and consolidating all of that into well expressed and putting those 3 or 4 points, I think would be beneficial for in another way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard to get around that problem when you have like massive scale of contributors.
Yeah, or massive scale of facts that contribute to the
Sure.
because they were deduped. So it was I mean it was a team of 20 people that figured it out. But
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's why they have so many data points about nuclear power.
no, just there are that many things to consider.
Mm-hmm.
These are facts, not opinions. These are like, well, I mean, they are opinions. They listed everyone's opinion about that anyone. So they did research over television and, newspapers and blogs and internet resources of everything anyone ever said about closing this nuclear plant. So, but if you're going to vote on it, in theory, you would have to understand all that to make a logical vote, a rational vote. I think
That's
so.
not deduplication. That's at least not how I would consider it.
Well, isn't there a probability that there's a piece of information in there that could change your decision?
No, it's not how decisions work. Like, let's say all of it boils down to, let's see, nuclear power. Um, it's not really so much. Let's focus on costs and risks. Costs are known resource limitations, like how much does energy cost? Um, how much energy are we going to have if we don't use nuclear power? Things like that. Risks are the things that might go wrong, the unpredictable things. And the thing about risks is that's what we use to describe facts, because facts describe the assumptions and predictions that we make about the future. And those are risks because it's in the future. We don't know for certain. So, eh, except all of these facts are in service of one prediction, which is this nuclear plant going to kill us? Is it going to poison us? Is it going to explode? Things like that. So,
Well, and also environmental impact, right?
mhm, sure,
So,
okay,
the
we'll include that
studies
too.
that have been the 4 competing studies on whether or not the fish are going to be damaged by the heat released by this properly operated power plant. So that's 4 data points for each 4 studies. So if you take all the
Mhm.
environmental impacts around the world for all nuclear plants that might be implying to this one, then that's now thousands of information that you need to decide that. But
Okay.
then you have all the incorrect stuff where people think something that isn't true that you still need to have in there for the person that has the inaccurate information.
Hmm. I guess what this is telling me is it's not interactive enough. This is what people are afraid of, is they put, when I say interactive, I don't mean people with the device. I mean people aren't negotiating with each other. We've got like, here's what I believe and here's what I think we should do, and they put that into the thing, and then that's it. That person's contribution doesn't change, and neither does anyone else's. So if somebody says, okay, I actually kind of like your plan, but could we tweak it so that this other thing that I'm worried about doesn't happen? Is there a mechanism for doing that? Or is there a mechanism for saying, okay, that study, can we get a follow-up study on that? Because I think it's a good approach, but I have some concerns about the methodology. And So if we say, okay, let's gather more data and then I'll be satisfied that this is safe. If we don't have a way of doing that, then that's going to bring the whole thing to a grinding halt.
Yeah, so when I say 9,000 though, that was covering seven main or so I can't remember the exact number, but it was like five different proposals.
Mhm.
So some were like keep it open, some was like keep it a lower power plant. And this was also that plant was being closed before the recent tide change of people just in general being more acceptable of nuclear power. But yeah, but it, I mean, even if you had, yeah, I mean, in the end, it is everyone's negotiating in the system. I mean, this wasn't a system because it was just kind of like a research project that had an output. Um, but all the data for all the decision points in between closing it down and would, in theory, be in there. But there was also no scoring system and no tying that to the different things. So then, yeah, what do people do with it with all that corpus of information? Even though it's been organized and deduped and made in a way that you can find it, if you're looking for something specifically, you don't have a way to understand what all that data means as far as making the decision. And that's kind of where a lot of these, if we have a argument mapping system and we took 1,000 people on a complicated, I think we'd end up with hundreds, if not, more data than any one person would want to read on a topic. Most people. There are some people that enjoy that. So the question is kind of how do you solve that problem, if that is the problem that we want to solve?
Bentley, did you see the map?
Yeah, it's. I think it's. I don't know if it's open and available.
Definitely not. I've never been able to find it.
Yeah,
I
they
keep
may have
hearing
had to
these.
take it down because they were working with the city on that, I think. But that's the one example because it's the largest because that's the only one they finished because that's the only time they had enough funding to fully finish a thought.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just wondering so with an argument map, you got your first initial nodes, and when that branches off and it branches off, so again to 9,000 nodes is totally plausible in my mind. But in your first layer, as I'd say, first level, that branches off the actual original question: should we close down the plant? How many nodes do you think was there? Just like I assume it was structured like that. Tell me if I'm wrong. Um, you have your question, and then you have the main concerns. Could poison my children, could have a nuclear meltdown, etc. But there's probably I'd expect to be a lot fewer. Was it structured like that? And can you remember how many of those initial nodes,
Yeah,
initial
I
layer?
mean, yeah. So in that case, there's like here's the seven like proposals. So it's like shut down the plant, keep it open at current things, reinvest in the plant, expand it, stuff like that. And then under each one, it would have kind of the pros and cons, the top level pros and cons. So if you had a certain point you were looking for, you could definitely find it in not too many steps because it is slightly even better than a binary search tree, right? So
And see,
it's a tree.
that's pretty much how I expect nodal maps to work, is where when you do have a fully thought out kind of argument, and people will quickly be able to say compare their views to say experts or a particular group, and then they'll be able to see, oh, okay, I think A, but they think B. This is a point of contention. So they don't really have to read 9,000. I would never expect them to have to go through so many different points. It would be identify those points of contention and then start delving into why, the information that leads to that particular point. And you would hope the way I see it is we typically we make decisions based with the information we have and with the values we have. And if you can go and see all the information that leads to a decision, and we all understand that information and agree with that information, then I expect it to be the only other difference to be a point of values. And at that point, then you can say, well, yeah, I care more for the environment, or you care more for the economy, or some other aspect. That's our point of difference. And at that point, we've reached an understanding, which I think is valuable. That's kind of how I see it working.
You reach
Yeah.
an understanding that's valuable.
Yeah.
I
So for
suppose.
example,
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
it's just basically it's a way of collecting everyone's views, and like often, I think a lot of our values are pretty similar. Like in the, and that's another big thing. There's a big long list of benefits, but one of them is that we often end up disagreeing despite agreeing on 80-90% of the kind of information. Often I see like big disagreements, and really it's a misunderstanding of the information. But really we should, on a lot of points, we would all typically agree. It's just like we get, the population in general gets led astray by tabloid journalism and, the people they know, their friends and whatnot. The information that everyone has is often just not the same. So I think, big advantage, just like having David, just having everyone basically having the same information is a big benefit. And if we can agree that, okay, we just got different values, that's also lets us basically make better decisions. Like, okay, more people care about this and less people care about that, and so but yeah, that's, I must admit, I have been challenging myself. I have been questioning myself as more comes to light these days, where it's clearly a lot of people's decisions have got nothing to do with information, and
Mm-hmm.
it's got more to do with, like you were saying earlier, Bentley, just getting along with people. So that that's a bit of a concern. It's kind of like if you present something and they can see the information, and it really has no impact on how they make their decisions, and that's a concern.
See,
Um,
I agree with a lot of that. I guess I think not all the time, but a lot of times when we talk about, oh, I just value these things differently, I think, or values often are, I value this more than that by a certain extent. Like, I don't value the environment so much that I'd kill myself and my whole family if the environment would be better, right? So it's a scale um, on what you're willing to compromise one thing for another, and so you value some things higher than other. So I think it's challenging to just say we value these things differently without saying like how much do we value them. But I also think that you talk about the information being different. It's also not just the information, it's the relative importance of that information. Because we may both believe that these two things be true. But I think this one's more important, not because I value it more, but because I think it's going to have a bigger impact on the problem. So if you're talking about environmental impacts of a nuclear power plant, and I think we're closer to global warming than the other person, then I'm going to say, well, the environment, a couple million fish dead, as opposed to people being flooded out of their homes across the globe, that are near that it's
yeah,
talking about the relative importance between these two pieces of information is one of the pieces that we're often not
I'm,
not discussing.
I agree. In my platform, I'm capturing both of those elements.
Oh,
Yeah, I
cool.
agree. And maybe more. Like that's another topic for another day. But like, there's other things that factor in on a decision. But I often wonder if we need more um, metrics. But yeah, that's it gets confusing at that point.
Well, yeah, being able to debate, is this more important than that or more impactful than that? You know, I guess that does come up in verbal debates, but often not as explicit. David came in
Yeah, I know it's nearing to the end,
and Cal.
but nice to see everyone. Um, yeah, but anyway, I guess well, I don't I don't know what the beginning of that question was, but it did make me want to give my thoughts in that I think a lot of people I think it's very difficult to be like informed and to research things, and so people are just kind of used to um having certain people that they trust. That's what I think. I think like people are there's there's certain sources that they people trust, and and when and they tend to say things that they agree with and it makes sense, and when they look at other people that maybe are presenting other things, they they often find issues with some of their arguments. So it's just a lot easier to have sources that you trust than to research every single thing. Um, and I don't know, I mean, recently there's voting, I find it very hard to be an informed voter, when you're looking up candidates, and I think the most you can do is go to like a voting guide, and you'll see you can compare, okay, this is how someone responded and this is how another person responded. But saying everybody's saying good things. Oh yeah, I want to raise the minimum wage. I want to, make more jobs. I want to be good. Nobody says bad things. So I find for candidates for voting, I feel like right now it's currently challenging to be informed, an informed voter, and yeah, I mean that's part of the what I've been thinking of in terms of the app that I'm making, what I would like. I think, well, that would make it easier in some ways, because then you'd have more discussion, and then you'd be, instead of just uh it'd be easier to evaluate. Instead, when you're talking about like very local elections, there's often not a lot of discussion on the individual candidates, and you can't rely on those sources that you say, okay, I trust this person and they said do this, and who knows, that's anyway, that's what it made me
D
think of.
Dave, you're in the US, right?
Yeah,
And are you talking about local or federal or
I
state?
was recently talking about, I mean, just there with that example, I was talking about like local, like
Mm. Your comments just like hit home for me, like with local elections here. Like
yeah,
totally agree. Yeah, like at a federal level, at least you get stuck in some investigations. You get reporters holding
yeah,
them to account. But the local
yeah,
level, no one really cares, and so
yeah.
they can just say whatever they want. And yeah, even when I've researched it, it's like I cannot tell. They say exactly the same.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Mm, not good.
Yeah, we're out here trying to think of the optimal ways to have rational discussions together, but literally having any sort of critical thinking sometimes is like most of what you need, right? Getting,
Mhm.
if you got everyone to think critically about local politics, you'd already be winning. Um, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Um,
I think defining the problem really helps
Mm.
because, well, first of all, if you find your anchor values, then it doesn't, it means you feel more secure seeing disagreeing perspectives. Like we were talking about the seeing the scores. If you see something and you see what score it has, then you feel, oh, well, everyone here disagrees with me. Well, obviously I can't trust anything that I read here. Like it's less intimidating when you know what you're concerned about, because then you're less reliant on whether other people believe something is true. And also, it helps with it helps lower the stakes for those different options that people are voting on. This is the sort of thing that has to be done before people vote. We're talking about the power plant, and we say, oh, pros and cons. Okay, keeping the nuclear power plant open, cons. There's a risk that it hurts the fish. Say, okay, that's a con, but it's not an anchor value. Why do we care about the fish? Do we care about the fish because it balances the ecosystem? We care about the fish because we want to fish recreationally and eat them and not get poisoned ourselves. So once we know that, then we can modify the plan and say, okay, if we want to do this, we turn no into yes if. If we want to do this, we need a plan for how do we respond if something happens to the fish? We use the constructive principle of preparation. We say, okay, do we test the fish regularly? If the fish all die, can we reintroduce them from somewhere else? And that's the sort of thing that makes the whole process work a lot better.
Hmm. Oh my God. I believe I have some things to say, as always. There's a political solution for voting, which is, I believe in English, would be direct digital democracy, which is in Argentine software, which basically you can vote what you believe in directly, and if you don't want to vote directly, you can vote for somebody else to represent you, and it can be any other user in the platform. Is a political platform. It simulates governments, but in a social network, and you can solve basically 90% of the elections and problems of governments. The next part is debate. I believe has a lot of layers that I don't think everybody sees it like I do. In my project, I'm doing in one layer, I have to define every definition of every word. In another layer, I have to define uh, what is the point of view of each person. In another layer, I have to identify what is the convergence and divergence of each part of each information that everybody believes in. The IBIS, when we want to focus on the questions, the problems, there are psychological differences in interpretations of what the question means to in a grammar point of view and in a psychological point of view and a philosophical point of view. Psychologically, a question is basically an enemy, a problem. We don't like them. We actually prefer to have solutions. We want the answer is what the educational system taught us. We basically learned that we have to memorize everything. We don't learn to question to learn, and it's basically only a problem to answer tests. Philosophically, questions are basically something to fill with to an empty space of information asking to be completed. If I'm asking something, I want somebody else to complete my mind map, if we are doing a mind map. And if we are doing and socially, questions are basically impossible to solve because we have another layer that is, what is our tribe? If your tribe is left, right, truth, is yourself, you're individualist. If you believe in individualism, you probably will become a truth seeker, unless you are pretty much a nihilist. And we don't have the same framework for viewing the world if you are in a different tribe. We can have different tribes talking about the same problems because they don't see the world as the same thing. For example, communists are postmodernists. They don't believe in absolute truth. Absolute truth is a weapon to gain power. In capitalism, truth is whatever we pay to make our narratives. For governments, truth is whatever the government uh, paid media to tell us. So we don't have the same framework of words. We don't have the same definitions of words. Each one of these is going to say that the definitions the other one is using is basically propaganda or a narrative or something else. We have to define exactly what the words are. Then we have to find what information exactly we want to complete. Then we have to differentiate what everybody else thinks, what exactly they see the informations as, because they can converge or diverge based on their definitions of words or how they see the world or anything else. And I believe there are other layers that we have to, for example, language. We should be able to translate everything based on the logic, critical thinking, metacognition. We don't have systems that simulate this in modern internet. I'm trying to make a system that basically simulates metacognition and critical thinking for machines, but but it's going to take some time to show exactly what this means. But I don't see that we can simply differentiate the people by their tribes, their point of views, and what they see, what they learned about the world. Everything have multiple layers to differentiate, and it's pretty hard to actually make every person talk globally in a global chat. We don't have a solution for this yet. And I don't think text is even possible to make this the way we write today. We have to learn a way to make mind maps represent logic in a more pure form. And this is the only solution I see today, unless we want the something like Neuralink to link to brains directly. We have to use a mind map to represent these things. And if we can represent the logic directly, we can even make AI smarter and integrate the collective collaborative reasoning tech can not only make humans collaborate when they think, but they can also integrate with machines if they are trained in literal metacognition and critical thinking. But for this, we have to create a data structure that can represent thought more precisely. And philosophy coding philosophy, I believe, is the best solution for this, because even if our debate is destructive or constructive or anything else, if we can make the interactions in a mind map to represent directly what philosophy has been telling us that philosophy should be like, we could take these methods of thinking, questioning, criticizing, defining things, and expand any set of definitions that we have with questions, with critics, with new mind maps. We can integrate them better because they have a standard data set, data structure, and this is pretty hard, but it can be done, and is going to be basically our the group's project, I believe. I hope it makes sense.
Yeah, I think so.
Go,
Alex, did you?
go for
Oh, just wanted to note that I think that, I mean, it'd be great if we can make that work eventually. I think that key to making that work in the short term and the long term is going to be defining these, defining your terms based on the shared reference frame of people's experiences. How, no matter what truth values you're trying to evaluate, eventually they have to come back to how does that affect people and what what do they care about being affected. So if we got to do that, and that simplifies the whole thing and keeps it grounded in actually improving the human condition.
Yes, I believe
Yeah.
we have dictionaries and AIs. We can simply tell AIs to read dictionaries, and based on our data structure, we can have the AI define in this data structure what they read in the dictionary, and we can create every definition of every word. And if we can do things like smart contracts or something like this, we can have uh, multiple definitions, and they are going to be concurrent. We can have them based on use, vote, or anything else. We can create a standard definition of every word. We can have, then we can simplify communication using these standards as the correct use for that moment. It's going to be, it could be dynamic or static, static. But the debate is basically fighting to see what the standard definition of a word could be. A debate is, in part, this is defining what is a valid statement using this word and a valid definition of this word itself. So they could be different debates. We can have recursive debates. I don't see if you. It looks like I'm not answering exactly what you said, what you asked.
I think that if you don't ground it in what humans want, you don't find those. And I say this having already got a theory of my own for how to do this, but um, identifying the basic building blocks of what people want and the concerns about obstacles that stand in their way. Um, if you don't do that, then any attempt to define standard definitions for words is either just not going to work at all or it's going to result in very dangerous machines.
Uh, there are other issues if we base them on what simple majorities want, because there's an old saying that democracy pure democracy is the tyranny of the ignorance, because most people are ignorant about most things. And if we don't use critics based on the definitions, which use statements to define words, we can't criticize them. And if we can't criticize them, we can't filter what is logically valid. We have to first be logically valid, and second, we want the definitions to be what most people believe in, because if most people don't believe in, they won't use the system, like you said. But it can't be what most people want only. It needs to be filtered by critics, by logic, and by voting, people can then select what most people believe in the world should be. This dual system, I believe, is necessary to be as close to what most people believe in and want, while still being useful because makes sense, logically
Mm.
speaking. So you were right, but I would enhance it with this logic validation by social critics, which is like a global debate about each definition of each word.
I agree with that. I think I'll have to clarify later. I meant something a bit different, and it'll take a bit too long to explain right now. But yeah,
Yeah.
I understand that concern, and I agree with that.
Yes, but I believe you may have improvements to make as well. But this critic filtering, I believe, is necessary, is essential, because without some moderation, we can't focus on anything. And if we don't define a standard, like I believe you think like me, without these standards, people will use any definition, and it won't be a debate. It will be a chat.
We're kind of running long on our meeting time, which of course we can go as long as we want. But I just want us to invite people if they had any closing statements or suggestions, or if you want to keep going.
I had one question that I wanted to ask to the group that might be quick and simple. You guys have been in the space for a while. I was curious if you know of an attempt to approach this problem as a Bayesian network. Has that been done or tried? Are you aware?
This
There's
is
a
a
couple
word
people. There's a
people
couple
used
people that
this word
use.
before.
There's a couple people that claim to be using Bayesian math in their systems. I'd have to look for them again. And people often describe what I'm doing as Bayesian, but it's not really, because it breaks a core tenet of Bayesian. I guess I hadn't thought. I don't think anyone's doing it as far as a Bayesian network. You specifically said network.
Yeah.
I mean, so that'd be kind of a scoring system, right?
It would be a kind of a scoring system, but you wouldn't necessarily have to expose the scores or like average the scores over people or anything like that. So kind of what I have in mind is, rather than having a statement and then attacking and defending arguments underneath it, you would sort of represent your root interest as a variable that can have different values. Maybe it is still a statement that can have true or false. But then you can have evidence in the form of, if my statement were true, then you would see this with a certain likelihood, you would see this with a certain likelihood, and I see these things out in the world. And you can also have evidence of the form, I think this, and that is likely to produce the truth of this statement. And you can express all of these things as probabilities. And then if you want arguments about goodness and badness, you can throw a utility function on top of the probability distributions and get a lot of flexibility out of it.
Like I intend to be able to use all backing all nodes, supporting nodes, and countering nodes in whichever way people think about. So I basically want to set it up so I can model any kind of way that people think about a problem. And I don't think it's going to be very useful. As soon as you start getting into that more complicated mathematical kind of solutions, I think it's going to become a very small number of people who are going to utilize that. But I personally always want to do that, and so it's at the very least, it's got to be usable by myself. So
Right.
I for one will definitely be able to introduce. I think you have to, like, basically I'm having models. I'm setting it up so I can model it basically in whichever way the supporting arguments interact and come together to actually form a decision. And very quickly, even in the most basic kind of questions, I find it gets pretty complicated very, very quickly. But yeah, to me, you have to, like, if you actually want to have a solution that actually solves real world problems, you got to capture that kind of complexity. Sorry, Caio.
I'm basically I don't like Bayesian style debates because I want a more precise and logic thing. For example, my project, I basically see it as any critics can change the whole map, and we can change the standard definitions of each word, or we can change the validity of any statement with a single new information or critic. And this allows me to 100% validate or not the belief system in a mind map based on the point of views of uh, each point of view. So Bayesian, I see it as a more statistical thing, but I don't believe without 0 or 100% chance of anything, people will believe in it. We can have a statistical debate forever, but when we have logical validation, we can solve a debate and critics, counter arguments, and new information can 100% change the results of a logical analysis of the mind map. So I believe we should focus more on the logical validation of the points of views of everybody. It's what I'm trying to do because I don't believe what we had until now, which were basically Bayesian systems, could actually change the mind of people. But
Yeah, makes sense.
And a lot of debates can't be solved. So in terms of like solving debate, like
I agree with
good
that.
to like elucidate the issue or be able to represent it clearly.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that many important questions can be solved with 100% certainty. Right? Much of the world is hidden. Almost all of the world is hidden. And so I think it makes sense to assign probabilities to things that are just represent people's state of knowledge given the evidence.
Yeah, I can't think of any system where people currently enter some sort of probability assumptions on their side or anything.
Are you working on something like that, Ryan?
I'm thinking about it. Yeah, I'm thinking about it. Just sort of toying with what the design would look like. But Dale, what you said about complexity, I think is probably the main issue. Um, so if you are wanting to talk about probabilities of variables, like mental models of hidden variables, then like Bayes is mathematically, like given a few axiomatic assumptions, the correct thing to do, right? So like the only reason to not try for Bayes is if you think that you're not going to be able to like simplify the experience enough to get a big enough crowd, um, which makes me feel like I want to try to make it as simple as possible and see if the product at the end is still like a reasonable approximation of like ideal reasoning. Um, and I think that I don't know how that would work for um, like an internet scale thing, but I can sort of imagine how it would work for say 10 people or certainly 2 people. So yeah, I'm thinking
What
about designing something like that.
what I'm hoping for is basically, I'm going to have the default, like every child node, or I should say every parent node has a bunch of child nodes which support the parent node, and that's based on a model. And I have a default
Mhm.
model, so it's pretty much like most argument maps will have some sort of default model where it's like, you count up the pros and cons, or you average the scores.
Mhm.
So I have the default model, which people can just go with, and hopefully that for most simple topics, most people who don't want to actually go into depth can use. But then for
Yeah.
those who want to do the more in-depth kind of analysis, can actually structure it and create a model that's a bit more detailed. And then I'm hoping that it would turn into a thing where like only some people need to actually work with the models, work with the more complex stuff, and then others can just follow along and basically rate, how much they think the supporting nodes are true or false.
Yeah.
So it'll just be like a percentage, like 0 to 100, and then that pretty much gets fed into a formula. So you got super users, I guess, would be able to
Mhm.
create models that most people, just like we can all do, even like something like a linear equation. You don't have to understand it. You can just put in the numbers pretty quickly and you get a solution. You get kind of like so if you have you can have 4 or 5 variables, you kind of give each one weights, and that arrives at an actual solution for which most people, yeah like I found in market research, you have your formulas that the analysts can understand it, but in general, your general reader of your reports has no
Mhm.
idea, and it's not important.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Um,
also just like things just depend a lot on people's values. So if you are risk
yeah.
averse, you might have come up with a totally different um, opinion than someone who is not risk averse, and both are totally valid. Uh, and
Yes, I think
and
for
you know,
me, I'm
it's
using.
it was I don't know, there was something about wicked problems. There was a podcast on wicked problems that talked
uh,
about that kind of thing.
Right.
Hmm. Yeah, that building on that, I think that not only for the standard definitions, but also for dealing with the probabilities, we also need to ground it in pragmatism in terms of
Yeah.
what are the consequences of the likely and unlikely events. In
Yeah.
terms of risk tolerance, it's okay. Well, somebody can spend $1,000 for like a 5% chance to make $100,000 or something.
Yeah.
Well, the probability is the same, but if you only have $1,000, your risk tolerance is going to be very different than if you're starting out with $100,000.
Yeah.
So same probability, different consequences. And I'll just leave this XKCD here to illustrate how Bayes ties in with pragmatism. Frequentists versus Bayesians. Has the sun exploded?
Yeah, that's great.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Alex. I think that unless you're strictly describing the probability of some objective truth in the world, like unless that's the thing you're trying to collaborate on figuring out, then you need some description of utility, and it needs to be a flexible description that includes, any sort of curve, risk averse or not, and that utility is definitely going to change per person. Yeah, totally agree. That's fundamental.
Oh, we got to mention just something to look at including. We can do things on contingencies. We can do things treating two different possibilities as both true, even if they're mutually exclusive. Because, like, let's say, okay, I'm facing a door. I don't know whether the door is going to be a stupid example. Like, okay, behind the door, is it an ice monster or a fire monster? I don't know, but I can carry a flamethrower and a fire extinguisher, even though it can't be both. If I'm equipped for both, it doesn't matter. I behave as though both are true, even though they can't be, and suddenly it doesn't matter.
I thought that was a wonderful example.
Yeah.
I think that's great.
Oh, thanks.
But yeah, that's like expected value of utility, right? I was thinking recently about whether you could have a utility on a credence itself. So like if there's some event A, like whether or not I get ice cream, this example is not going to work out, but bear with me. Where if A is true, then I get ice cream. I have a high utility on A equals true, low utility on A equals false. I wonder if you can also have a utility on the belief that A is true, where if maybe it's bad for me to believe that I'm going to have ice cream later because I'll be distracted from my work or something like that. The reason why that's kind of interesting to me to model is because of like tribal thinking effects, like groupthink, where maybe I believe that it's bad for Trump to be president. Sorry to get political, but just as an example, I believe that it's bad for Trump to be president, but maybe all my family believes that it's good for Trump to be president. And so I have like a high utility on believing that it's good for Trump to be president. Anyway, I don't know.
I think we can debate about bad and good, but we have to define bad and good. And this is a philosophical question, and we have to develop the ethics and morality themselves logically so we can apply it to other debates. If we are going to use good and bad, we need to have precise and deep definitions of the meaning of good, bad, shouldn't, must, need. The words themselves can be defined, but it's complicated because we have to first debate a lot about everything, define them precisely, and then we have to criticize these definitions as much as we can so we can have better validations of their uses and we can learn more about what good and bad are themselves. So it's a coding of philosophy and critical debate again. We have to, I only see this way of applying them. My family once asked, what if you were debating about fantasy things? If you're debating about a monster, if we were debating about a monster, we can define if this monster is a fantasy or a real monster, if it's a literal or metaphorical monster. We need to define these things, the definitions then we have to define how we are applying them, the definitions themselves, because some words can have some metaphorical definitions, and then we can apply them to the mind map. If it's a logical mind map, we can simply drop it, and the definition of the word itself is going to validate the use or not of the word, the should, good, need, and everything else. But it's a complicated thing to do in text, because you have to break the text into more parts and definitions. But I believe it can be done in mind maps and text alike if we can have the definitions of the words well defined.
To answer your question, Ryan, but utility of beliefs, that would fall under the keyword of habits. That's how I would define that. So if you're looking to have a belief because it gives you some value, it's probably like other than predictive value.
Yeah.
It's probably going to be a value in how it affects habits that you want to develop or want to leave behind.
Interesting. Would that also, so in the example of like a political belief that your tribe holds, would you call that a habit of belief? Like where there's some incentive not to hold some black sheep belief?
Yes, part of that is to act as a shared reference frame and signaling of identity for the tribe, showing that we all have the same interests, signaling that we can trust each other. Trust is another keyword. So when you add more people, then that comes into play. But also that belief. Sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second. Active habits. You want to? Comfort. Professing the belief in ways that accommodate other people's thinking habits. So if everyone agrees, everyone feels all comfortable. Nobody has to be confronted with uncomfortable questions that about choices that they might not want to make, things like that. So keeping everyone on the same page about what songs they're singing, what beliefs they're professing, that accommodates other people's habits as well. So that's how that ties in.
Yeah, interesting.
One feature needed for the comfort to happen would be groups, or as I would like to say, to call them ideologies, because if they believe what they want to believe because they are comfortable with this belief, they don't have a scientific uh, understanding of the word. They have an ideological, they have an ideology because they have unquestionable ideas. They're dogmas like religions. If we can't criticize some parts of our belief system, we have an ideology which some people call comfort. So I'm not 100% in favor of it. We can create huge bubbles, but at the same time, in my project, at least I'm making a feature which I call ideology. You can have your group that believes some things, and these things are fixed because your group wants to talk as if they were real, and you can ignore the global debates.
Earlier, Bentley made a distinction between two different goals that we might have in developing these systems, which are either mainly with the goal of understanding other people's perspectives or to arrive at a correct conclusion. And I think I'm more interested in the former, like being able to sit down with someone and have a structured way of fully explaining your your position and like narrowing down on exactly what the difference is between our worldviews and utility functions that like causes us to have a difference in belief, and then maybe scaling that up so that I can understand the opposite end of the political spectrum. But it sounds like some folks are more interested in like uh, logical deduction of correct beliefs or like surveys to arrive at correct beliefs by like I think that's maybe one of the goals of voting on arguments. Correct me if I'm wrong. But are is that a like a general distinction that people agree with? And if so, like where do you guys fall on that dichotomy?
I believe if we can do both, and the ideal in a ideal world, we could do both because there are different tribes. There are individuals, which everybody is an individual, but there is at the same time the correct uh, consensus, and beyond everything else, there is probably absolute truth, which is not necessarily essential to the rest of the debates. To define what the tribe ideology or a group believes in, we need the beliefs of the individuals of that tribe, and to define it in a precise way to understand exactly what the tribe believes in, we need to define first precisely what the individuals believe in. So we need the individuals to define the tribes, to define the debate, to define a real consensus, and maybe an absolute truth if everything is valid in like a Sudoku, you know, the 1 to 9 in the groups. If you can fill one space, you can reduce the number of possibilities of each square. And if you solve everything, you know exactly what every square should have inside it. It's an absolute truth when you complete the Sudoku. If you can fill completely, if you can criticize each part of each theory of each thing, everything else, you could probably completely complete the a mind map. And if you completely complete a logic mind map, you could probably find an absolute truth. But it's also I did my project so recursive that I don't believe people will ever complete it. So it's complicated to complete an absolute truth in a recursive fractal of critics and ideas. And we can the question was if we should focus on individual or in the collective. I calculated the collective consensus based on every individual belief, and excluding the ideas that have valid critics, because they can't be a correct answer to anything because they have a critic unless you criticize the critic itself. So it's pretty recursive and dynamic. It's basically it's kind of absurd to do what I'm doing, but it's fun.
Well, I just wanted to say what in terms of my app, I guess I'm probably more focused on displaying uh two sides because my my app is kind of focused on two sides of an issue, and so yeah, I would lean towards just trying to display the the two different sides and communicate like where they disagree and where they agree, and just kind of be able to visualize arguments and counter arguments and uh And also in terms of like scoring, um, I feel like scoring can still be, or like voting can still be beneficial, like um if I'm scoring on, if I'm like ranking relative to one side of an issue. So it's still good to know like if it's one person versus person two, it's good to know what is person two's strongest arguments, and or it's at least yeah, it can be helpful to know. I mean, if I was making trying to make a case for something, I would like to know what are the strongest what does people resonate with the most. But then when you try to score them relative to each other, which is what I'm actually currently have, it does open up the doors to like I don't know. Then you're trying to assume that you're trying to find some answer from the app, which is uh, not something I'm really trying to necessarily do. So I don't know if that answers the question. I guess I'm more on the I think I'm more on the just visualizing the argument more than finding the truth.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So you're saying that like you sort the cons and you sort the pros, but the moment you like sort them relative to each other, one of them's going to be at the top, and then that's like a user could interpret that as like the objective truth if it gets voted to the top.
Yeah,
Is that sort of
well,
like
yeah. Right now I have it so that just like I have all these points on either side,
Mhm.
and you could say, oh, well, it's clear like the one person has really high votes and the other person has really low votes, but
Yeah,
it could very easily, and well, maybe most of the time, that's because the one person has brought more of their friends to vote than
yeah,
the other
yeah.
person, or something like that. And so it's, yeah, so I haven't really implemented it quite yet, but my thinking was rather than trying to find a truth or like a way to kind of determine this scoring in a fair way, just try to make the scoring relative to each person. And then it doesn't matter if you have a lot of friends coming to the site, it'll still be helpful to know which points that you're making are the strongest of your points.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know. I don't really have that working yet.
Cool.
Right.
Makes sense.
To your question, I was, yeah, I'm more on the side of wanting to, and solving questions that can be answered. Like, is this based on the evidence that we have right now and all the information we have? Is this thing true? So more like, is the Earth spherish or is it flattish? Right. So that's the area I'm focused in, and then there are some things in that case where like you do studies and there's probabilities, and I haven't put that in, but that would be something in the future, but it's not based on priorities because it's just like what do we kind of know, and have we gotten all the information out of everyone's heads that would affect whether we think that this is the way reality is or isn't.
Hmm.
So that's yeah, and I think most of the people are on the other side of the fence where they're just helping people kind of understand the scope and what other people thinking, and also and communicating better and coming to finding some compromise agreements, which I think is based on, or some of those are based on some of these facts that we're still debating because we don't have a system to kind of like adjudicate evidence at the
Sure.
moment. So
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Mhm.
I kind of have a weird perspective on this. Um, so I do actually want to help people go forward and make decisions. I think that finding the truth is a pragmatic way to do that. It helps us navigate towards the outcomes that we want. I think that in order to do that, we do need to help people understand each other because I see, like, for other than other than being motivated by curiosity, which is awesome in and of itself, but a lot of what we do with truth is instrumental. So if we're arguing about something, we first have to ask, why do you want to know? You say like, oh, is this, I use a bunch of these in when I have a workshop that involves epistemology. Like, oh, is this snake or is, let's say, um, okay. So you say, well, so, if you have a snake that has red and white candy cane stripes, is it venomous? You say, you know what? No, it's safe. That's no, I read it in a book and it's safe. Why do you ask? Oh, because there's one that's slithering up to you. Oh, suddenly your answer might change. You might not be that confident in that prediction. Facts are predictions, predictions are risks. So it's how, when we make the decision, it's do we, based on what we observed and what we're prepared for, are we willing to take this risk? And if we're not agreed on that, then we have to figure out what information do we need to unite on a decision and go and collect that information in a way that satisfies us, or we need to prepare ourselves and change the situation so that that information becomes irrelevant. So we could do some tests with the snake, or we could just stay away from the snakes. And that's how we arrive at something together, when maybe just feeding all the information that we have right now isn't going to produce a, a united, decisive outcome. We have to decide how do we move forward together.
That's really interesting. Can I ask, Alex, what scale of group you're interested in working with?
What scale of group? I mean, I'm trying to change the world, so I guess it depends on your time frame.
Yeah, okay. I guess so. For example, like you're talking about systems that help you determine um, the most valuable information to seek. Is that right? Like where to spend your like research resources almost?
Oh, so sort of. It's more like connecting that with the general public, because right now we've got sections of the general public that say we're the scientists want us to take these risks or not take these risks, and we disagree because we don't trust their methodology or their vested interests, and because they don't understand the trade-offs that that imposes on us. So it would really help unite people if we look at, okay, how how do we create studies that satisfy them? Example, I used another slightly different venomous snakes example. Is scientists say, stop killing these snakes, they're harmless. We did studies. I say, like, and I listed a bunch of potential problems with the studies. Say, okay, how about a scientist picks up a snake and lets it bite them? That that would be something that would satisfy a lot more people. There's problems
Hmm.
with that too, but it's, you have literally skin in the game, things like that.
Interesting. Okay.
This example, your example of snakes remember me of one of the I don't know if he was a creator of mind maps, but he had a suggestion that people should use images. So if we want to identify if a snake is venomous or not, we need images in our debate for some cases like this one. And the other thing is, I believe we can calculate the risks of decisions using logic and math in the same validation system. For example, if you want to identify if you should or not get out of the house because there's a snake, I believe you should uh, calculate the, I don't know, the number of venomous and non-venomous snakes which have these colors. So we can see the chances of it being or not this venomous snake or not.
Yeah.
And you can calculate the same way that you can say if something uh, is fantasy good or is dangerous. You could use the same systems based on semantics, which is basically how we psychologically compact the logic of complex systems and frameworks, but we can represent them with in a mind map or in a text, compressing the logic. But this logic is not only validation, which is Boolean 0 or 1, but can also be a number. 10% of the snakes that are red and white are venomous. We can simply calculate the chances of it being venomous or not. So the risk, the need, the good, and everything else, there are representations that we can do, but I believe we need to search more about the technologies that exist to use them integrated in one another than simple debates, because I like to debate a lot, but if we want to fix the problem, we need to be realistic. And I think searching what technologies exist will help us even understand what we can do in the RDF world. For example, they have this statement-based valid logic validation, but we can integrate math in it, and we can change the numbers of snakes, so we can argue, debate about how many snakes there are. There are venomous, there are colors, there are everything. We can integrate this information, the number of snakes, the characteristics of the snake, to identify the risk of finding this specific uh, appearance of snake inside your home, and if staying in your home is safe or not. We can apply this later to votes, to politics, to wars, to everything else. And I just believe we can do it in a integrated way to unite the human communication, and we won't lose the context from one debate to the next one. That's the canonical debate project, but basically, and I believe I'm doing something similar. I don't know if you guys saw the paper.
Yep. I've got to head off, guys. Thanks for chatting. Cheers.
Thanks for coming, Dale.
Nice to meet you, Dale.
Yep.
How long
Yeah.
do meetings typically go? Sorry.
1 to
Well,
2 hours. It's
Okay.
time now.
Gotcha.
It's a
Well, I
good
think
time to end.
we usually shoot for an hour, but they usually go longer. So
Yeah. I think when I'm here, it goes more to 2 hours. But you chosen this topic based on the document we had in the group?
Me?
Yes, you're the organizer of today.
Oh, no, sorry.
No?
I was just curious about things.
no,
No,
yeah,
no.
You guys
I think
simply started
that's
asking
not
and
my that's a,
yeah.
no, but that's great.
No, this is
I
Ryan's
I
first meeting though, and so we thought
yeah,
give him some time to talk about what he wants to do.
yeah. Thank you.
great. I like both ways.
yeah, nice to meet you, Ryan. And maybe I've seen you, Alex, once before. Maybe I'm not sure. Maybe just on. I watch sometimes. I don't know if I've been in the live meeting or not, or just watched. Sometimes I just watch previous ones. But nice to meet everyone, and I'll check the beginning um, to learn more about what I missed.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, I'll go ahead and shut down the meeting now, and we'll see everyone next week. Feel free if you see anyone interesting to set up another meeting. We're a pretty casual group.
Next week or next month?
Next month, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we do them monthly now. We used to do them weekly. We used to do them twice a week, actually. But if people want to have other meetings, they always can use this URL for this sort of thing. All right, but I'll go and close off the meeting. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone. Have a good one.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
Bentley.
Bye.
Yeah.